My name is Maximilian, and I'm 34 years old. I never thought I'd wake up in a hospital bed to hear my own parents tell doctors, "He's not our real son. We owe him nothing." Then they left me to die. The betrayal crushed me as I faded into darkness, certain I wouldn't survive. But fate had other plans. Now they're back for my inheritance, expecting a dead man's fortune. Instead, they found an empty bed and a letter that will destroy everything they thought they knew. Before I begin my story, where are you watching from? Hit subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. I grew up in what looked like the perfect American family from the outside. Our two-story colonial, in an upscale Boston suburb, had the manicured lawn, the white picket fence, and all the trappings of upper-middle-class success. My father, Gregory, worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown, while my mother, Victoria, ran a local art gallery that catered to wealthy clients. We never wanted for material things. I had my own room with the latest video games, wore brand-name clothes, and went on nice vacations twice a year. But something always felt off. From my earliest memories, I sensed I didn't quite belong. There was an invisible wall between me and my parents that I could never breach, no matter how hard I tried. Meanwhile, my younger sister Cassandra seemed to effortlessly capture their affection and attention. The pattern was established early. When I was 10, my birthday fell on a Wednesday. I came down to breakfast expecting at least some acknowledgement, maybe pancakes or a small present. Instead, my parents were rushing around as usual, my father buried in his newspaper, my mother checking her calendar. "Don't forget Cassandra's dance recital tonight," my mother reminded everyone. I cleared my throat. It's my birthday today." My father glanced up briefly. "Oh, right. Happy birthday, Max," then went back to his paper. My mother nodded distractedly. "We'll pick up a cake on the way home from the recital." They forgot the cake. 3 weeks later, for Cassandra's 8th birthday, they threw an elaborate carnival-themed party with hired entertainers, a custom cake, and 30 guests. I still remember helping blow up balloons while my parents fussed over every detail for my sister. High school brought more of the same. I threw myself into academics and technology, areas where my sister showed little interest. When I was named valedictorian, my parents attended graduation out of obligation. I spotted them in the audience during my speech, my mother checking her watch, my father scrolling through emails on his phone. Afterward, they took a few perfunctory photos before rushing home to help Cassandra prepare for prom. Even though it was a week away, "We're proud of you," my father said mechanically, patting my shoulder as they left. It was the closest thing to affection I'd received in years. College acceptance letters brought another revealing moment. I'd been accepted to MIT with a partial scholarship, a dream come true. When I showed my parents, their reaction was puzzling. "MIT? That's ambitious," my father said, frowning slightly. "The tuition will be expensive, even with the scholarship," my mother added. When Cassandra got accepted to a mid-tier state school the following year, they threw a party and bought her a new car as a congratulatory gift. I got myself through college with my scholarship, student loans, and part-time jobs. My relationship with Cassandra was complicated. As children, we occasionally played together. But as we grew older, she seemed to internalize our parents' attitudes. She became skilled at manipulating situations to maintain her favored status. "Mom and Dad just understand me better," she'd say with a shrug when I questioned the disparity in our treatment. "Maybe if you weren't so different." That word followed me throughout childhood. I was too serious, too quiet, too focused on boring things like computers and science. Cassandra was social, charming, and effortlessly drew people in, especially our parents. My salvation came during sophomore year at MIT, when I took an advanced computing course with Professor Walter Richardson. After I submitted my first project, he asked me to stay after class. "Maximilian, this algorithm you've developed is extraordinary," he said, gesturing to my work. "Have you considered applications in the medical field?" That conversation changed my life. Walter became more than a professor. He became the mentor I'd always needed. He saw potential in me that my own family never acknowledged. Under his guidance, I developed software that could predict medical complications based on patient data, potentially saving countless lives. By senior year, Walter was helping me navigate patent applications and introducing me to potential investors. My first attempts to launch a company after graduation met with rejection. 15 venture capital firms turned me down, citing my youth and inexperience. I lived in a tiny apartment, surviving on ramen and determination. When I called home during this period, conversations were brief. "Still doing that computer thing?" My father would ask, dismissively. "When are you going to get a real job with benefits?" My mother would add. Then came the breakthrough. A major hospital agreed to pilot my software, and the results exceeded everyone's expectations. Suddenly, the investors who had rejected me were calling daily. I secured funding, expanded my team, and within 3 years, MetaPredict was valued at over $50 million. Success brought minimal change to my family dynamics. My parents suddenly wanted to reconnect, especially after the business press began covering my company. Cassandra started calling more often, usually when she needed money for another failed business venture or to cover debts from her lavish lifestyle. Last year, a healthcare conglomerate acquired MetaPredict for $300 million. I retained a significant ownership stake and continued as CEO, but the acquisition made me wealthy beyond what my younger self could have imagined. 3 weeks before the accident, I had dinner with my family. My parents' house looked the same, but I noticed new luxury items, watches, artwork, furniture that seemed beyond their usual spending habits. "Business must be good," I commented to my father. "Oh, the market has its ups and downs," he replied vaguely. "Nothing like your success, though." Throughout dinner, they asked pointed questions about my finances, the acquisition deal structure, and my estate planning. "At your level of wealth, you really should have everything properly arranged," my father advised. "You never know what might happen." I didn't realize then how prophetic or calculated those words would be. The night everything changed started ordinarily enough. I had just finished a late meeting with our product development team about a new module for pediatric applications. Rain had been falling steadily all day, and by 10 o'clock, it had become a downpour. "You should grab a ride service," my assistant Jennifer suggested as I gathered my things. "It's just rain," I smiled. "I'll be fine." The highway was slick, but not overly crowded. I drove carefully, thinking about the project timeline we'd just finalized. My windshield wipers worked at maximum speed, but visibility remained poor. I never saw the truck until it was too late. Later, I learned what happened from police reports and witness statements. A semi-truck hydroplaned across 3 lanes, creating a chain reaction. My car was hit from both sides, the impact so severe that rescue workers had to use the jaws of life to extract me from the crumpled metal that had once been my luxury sedan. I remember fragments. The squeal of tires on wet asphalt, the blinding headlights coming toward me, the sickening crunch of metal, the sharp pain as my airbag deployed, the warm wetness of blood, the strange silence that followed before sirens began wailing in the distance. In the ambulance, I drifted in and out of consciousness. Paramedics worked frantically, their voices urgent but professional. Male, mid-30s, multiple trauma, possible internal bleeding, BP dropping. "We need to move fast." Notify trauma team were 4 minutes out. At the hospital, the emergency room was a blur of bright lights and focused activity. I felt my clothes being cut away, heard machines beeping, felt the sharp sting of needles. A doctor leaned over me, her face serious. "Maximilian, can you hear me? I'm Dr. Patel. You've been in a serious accident. We're doing everything we can." I tried to respond but couldn't form words. The pain was overwhelming, and darkness kept threatening to pull me under. More voices, more movement, medical terminology. I vaguely understood from developing my software. "CT shows significant internal bleeding. We need to get him to surgery immediately. Who's his emergency contact?" I heard a nurse reading information from my phone or wallet. Parents listed as emergency contacts: Gregory and Victoria Hartwell. Time passed strangely. I later learned it was nearly 3 hours of emergency procedures, to stabilize me before my parents arrived. I was semi-conscious, floating in a haze of pain, medication, and trauma, when I heard their voices. Dr. Patel was explaining my condition. Mr. Hartwell has sustained serious injuries, including internal bleeding, a punctured lung, and head trauma. He needs immediate specialized surgery. What are his chances? My father's voice, cool and detached. With proper treatment, good. But we need to act quickly. He's currently stable, but critical. A pause. Then my mother speaking. And the costs? For this treatment? The doctor sounded surprised. He has insurance, but there may be some procedures not fully covered due to their specialized nature. However, our focus right now is saving his life. And if he doesn't get this specialized surgery, my father again, the prognosis would be very poor. I wouldn't expect survival beyond 48 hours without intervention. Another pause, longer this time. I strained to listen through the fog of medication. We need to discuss something with you, my father said, his voice lower now. Maximilian is not actually our biological son. He was adopted as an infant. I felt a jolt of shock cut through the medication haze. Adopted? This was the first I'd ever heard of it. I see, Dr. Patel replied carefully. But legally, you're still his parents and next of kin. Technically, yes, my mother said. But we haven't been close in many years. He has his own life, his own money. Are you authorized to make medical decisions for him? The doctor's voice had taken on a strange tone. We're listed as his emergency contacts, my father said. But what we're saying is, we don't feel comfortable authorizing expensive procedures that may not even work. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, Dr. Patel said slowly, without this surgery, your son will almost certainly die. He's not our real son, my mother said flatly. We owe him nothing. He's an adult with his own resources. I felt cold despite the hospital blankets. Not from blood loss or shock, but from the ice in their voices. 34 years of feeling like an outsider suddenly made terrible sense. We're not signing any authorization, my father said firmly. And we're not taking on any financial responsibility. You're refusing to authorize life-saving treatment for your son? Dr. Patel's voice was incredulous. As we've explained, he's not really our son, my mother repeated. We raised him. Yes, but we have no obligation at this point. I heard footsteps, the sound of them walking away. My own parents, leaving me to die. The ultimate betrayal, after a lifetime of smaller ones. This is unbelievable, I heard a nurse mutter. Call ethics and legal immediately, Dr. Patel ordered someone, and check if there's any other emergency contact in his records. As the medical staff rushed to find alternatives, I felt myself slipping deeper into unconsciousness, wondering if I would ever wake up again. I don't care about the protocols. I'm not letting him die because his parents are monsters. The fierce voice of Dr. Sarah Martinez cut through my darkness. I couldn't open my eyes yet, but I could hear her arguing with someone in my hospital room. Dr. Martinez, without next of kin authorization or a healthcare proxy. Then we convened the ethics committee for an emergency session. She interrupted. This is a treatable patient with good chances of recovery. I'm not losing him over paperwork. Later, I would learn that Sarah Martinez was a first-year attending physician who had lost her own brother in a car accident years before. She fought for me like I was family when my actual family had abandoned me. The hospital's ethics committee met within hours and granted temporary medical decision-making authority to the hospital while they sought court intervention. They began prepping me for surgery even before the paperwork was complete. But the real salvation came when Professor Walter Richardson arrived. Apparently, I had listed him as a secondary emergency contact years ago and forgotten about it. I came as soon as they called me. I heard him tell Dr. Martinez, "What do you need from me?" "We need someone to petition for temporary guardianship to make medical decisions," she explained. "His parents have refused treatment." "They what?" Walter's normally calm voice rose in shock. I can't even find words. "Will you help us?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Absolutely. Whatever it takes." While I underwent emergency surgery, Walter was making phone calls to lawyers and appearing before an emergency judicial hearing via video conference. By the time I was wheeled into recovery, the hospital had legal authorization to provide all necessary treatment. And Walter had been granted temporary medical guardianship. The surgery was complicated. I had a ruptured spleen, internal bleeding, a punctured lung, and a traumatic brain injury. The medical team worked for 8 hours to repair the damage. Despite their best efforts, I slipped into a coma after surgery. For a week, I existed in darkness. Later, Walter told me he sat by my bed every day, talking to me about projects we'd worked on, reading technical journals, and simply keeping me company. He put his own life on hold, canceling classes, rescheduling meetings, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair. When I finally opened my eyes, he was the first person I saw. "Welcome back," he said, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You gave us quite a scare." My throat was too dry to speak, but I managed to squeeze his hand weakly. A nurse noticed I was awake and called for Dr. Martinez. The next few hours were a blur of medical assessments, cautious optimism, and my first tentative steps back into consciousness. It was day 3 after waking, when I finally asked the question that had been haunting me. "My parents," I whispered, my voice still raspy from the breathing tube they'd recently removed. "Did I dream what they said?" Walter's face darkened. "No, Max, you didn't dream it." Dr. Martinez was checking my vitals and paused. "They refused to authorize your treatment. Said you weren't their real son, and they had no obligation to you." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. Somewhere deep inside, I'd been hoping it was just a hallucination from the trauma and medication. They just left me to die? The words felt surreal coming from my mouth. Walter nodded grimly. "The hospital had to get emergency authorization to treat you. And you became my guardian," I said, looking at Walter with gratitude. "Temporary medical guardian," he corrected gently. "Just until you're well enough to make your own decisions again." "Which you are now," Dr. Martinez added, making a note in my chart. "Your cognitive function tests are showing excellent recovery, Maximilian." The following days were focused on physical recovery. I learned that while my injuries had been severe, I was lucky. No permanent paralysis or major cognitive impairment. The physical therapist, Miguel, worked with me daily, helping me regain strength and mobility. "Small steps," he reminded me when I grew frustrated with my weakness. "Your body has been through a war." My mental and emotional state was another matter. The hospital's social worker, Lisa Cheng, began visiting regularly. "It's okay to not be okay right now," she told me during our first session. "You've experienced physical trauma and profound emotional betrayal simultaneously." One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the accident, the full weight of everything crashed down on me. Walter had brought me some personal items from my apartment, including a photo I kept on my desk, the only family photo I displayed, from a rare happy moment at my college graduation. Looking at those smiling faces, knowing what I knew now, something broke inside me. Walter held my shoulder as I sobbed, letting out 34 years of feeling unwanted and the fresh wound of their ultimate rejection. How could they do that? I asked between breaths. Who does that to their child? They don't deserve to call themselves parents, Walter said firmly. Family isn't just blood or legal documents. It's the people who stand by you, who value your life. As my physical strength returned, so did my determination. I began asking questions about my adoption, my legal status, and most importantly, why my parents would maintain the pretense for decades, only to abandon me when it mattered most. There has to be more to this story, I told Walter, and I'm going to find out what it island. As soon as I was stable enough to use my laptop, I began researching adoption records and laws. Massachusetts had sealed adoption records, but there were legal pathways to access them. Under certain circumstances, Walter connected me with Amanda Daniels, a lawyer specializing in family law who agreed to take my case. Your situation is unique, Amanda explained during our first meeting in my hospital room. Medical necessity can be grounds for unsealing adoption records, and in your case, We have a compelling argument that knowledge of your biological family's medical history could be crucial to your treatment. While Amanda worked on the legal front, I hired Michael Reeves, a private investigator recommended by the hospital's head of security. Michael was a former police detective with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. "I need to know everything," I told him. "About my adoption, my biological parents, and why my adoptive parents would hide this from me for 34 years, only to reveal it when they thought I was dying." Michael nodded gravely. "People don't usually make decisions like that without a motive. I'll find it." Within 2 weeks, the first pieces began falling into place. Through a combination of legal petitions, skilled investigation, and some creative data analysis, we learned that I had indeed been adopted as an infant. My biological parents, James and Rebecca Thornton, had died in a car accident when I was just 6 months old. The irony of nearly meeting the same fate wasn't lost on me. More surprisingly, we discovered that I had been the beneficiary of a trust established by my biological grandparents. The trust had been managed by a bank with my adoptive parents, receiving monthly payments for my care and education until I turned 25, at which point the remaining balance should have transferred to me. "Did you ever receive notification about this trust when you turned 25? Amanda asked me. "Never," I replied, stunned by the revelation. Not a word. Further investigation revealed that Gregory and Victoria had legally changed the trust's disbursement terms when I was 10, citing special needs education requirements that never existed. They had systematically drained the trust, using the funds to finance their lifestyle, and later, Cassandra's education and expenses. "The amounts are substantial," Michael explained, showing me financial records, approximately $2 million over 20 years, with the bulk withdrawn during your teen years, and when Cassandra was in college. This explained how they had afforded our comfortable lifestyle despite modest professional incomes. It also explained why they had seemed disappointed rather than proud when I received my scholarship to MIT. They had been counting on my continuing financial dependence to justify accessing the trust funds. While recovering in the hospital, I authorized Michael to investigate my parents' current financial situation. What he found was alarming. Gregory had made several high-risk investments that had failed spectacularly. They had second and third mortgages on their house, credit card debt in the 6 figures. They were on the verge of financial collapse. "They're practically bankrupt," Michael reported. "Based on these numbers, they'll lose the house within 6 months unless they find a significant influx of cash." Around this same time, hospital security reported something interesting. My parents had contacted the hospital administrative office, asking about my personal effects and requesting information about final arrangements. They hadn't asked about my condition or prognosis. They had assumed I was dead or dying. "They specifically asked if you had any papers or documents with you when you were admitted," the security director told me. "When told that such information couldn't be released, your father became insistent, claiming he needed access to your financial information to settle your affairs." This coincided with Michael discovering that my apartment had been entered during my hospitalization. Security camera footage from my building showed my parents and sister using a spare key I'd forgotten they had, searching through my home office. What were they looking for? I wondered aloud. The answer came when Amanda uncovered my last will and testament, a document I'd created when first starting my company. It was a simple will that I'd never updated after achieving success, leaving most of my estate to my parents with small bequests to a few friends and charities. They needed money desperately, Amanda concluded, and suddenly their adopted son, who they clearly resented for years, was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. If you died, they'd inherit everything. I finished, feeling sick. They abandoned me in the hospital, hoping I'd die, then planned to cash in. One final, damning piece of evidence came when Michael obtained records showing my parents had consulted an estate attorney the very day after leaving me at the hospital. They had begun preparing to claim my assets even while I fought for my life. Meanwhile, Cassandra's social media showed no indication of concern about my condition. Instead, she had posted about shopping for a new car and looking at luxury apartments, commenting to a friend that she was coming into some money soon. As all these pieces came together, I felt a cold clarity replace my hurt and confusion. This hadn't been a momentary lapse in judgment or panic at the hospital. This was calculated. They had seen my accident as a financial opportunity and had actively chosen to let me die to solve their money problems. "What do you want to do with all this information?" Amanda asked me. I thought carefully before answering. "I want justice, but not revenge. I want them to face consequences. But more importantly, I want to be free of them. Completely. And I think I know exactly how to accomplish that." By the 3rd week after the accident, I was well enough to be discharged from the hospital, though I still needed ongoing physical therapy and follow-up care. The question was where I would recover. My apartment wasn't suitable given my limited mobility, and I didn't want to be there anyway, knowing my family had violated that space. Walter offered his guest house, a comfortable 1-bedroom cottage behind his Cambridge home. "You'll have privacy, but I'll be close if you need anything," he said. "And my housekeeper can help with meals and basic care." With my living arrangements settled, I turned my full attention to addressing the situation with my family. I assembled a team consisting of Amanda for legal counsel, Michael for investigation and security, my financial advisor Thomas, and Dr. Martinez, who had become both a friend and medical advocate. "I want to be strategic, not emotional," I told them during our first planning meeting. "They tried to use my death for financial gain. I want them to face appropriate consequences, but I also want to move forward with my life." Together, we developed a comprehensive plan with several key components. First, I created a new will with Amanda's guidance, removing my parents and sister as beneficiaries entirely. Instead, I established a foundation to support medical care for patients without family support, left provisions for Walter and other friends who had stood by me, and included several charitable organizations focused on adoption support and patient advocacy. Second, I worked with Thomas to restructure my assets, creating irrevocable trusts that would be protected regardless of what happened to me. This included securing funds for my ongoing medical care and recovery, as well as business continuity plans for my company. Third, I filed legal actions to recover the misappropriated trust funds from my biological grandparents. Amanda advised that the statute of limitations had expired on some of the older withdrawals, but we could still pursue significant recovery for the more recent financial manipulations. "They committed fraud," Amanda explained. "They misrepresented your needs to gain access to funds that should have been preserved for your benefit. We have a strong case." Fourth, I authorized Michael to document everything and prepare evidence for potential criminal charges related to financial exploitation and medical abandonment. While we weren't immediately pursuing criminal prosecution, having the evidence ready gave us leverage. Finally, and most personally satisfying, I crafted a detailed letter to my parents. This wasn't a hasty note written in anger, but a carefully considered document that laid out everything I had discovered, my knowledge of their actions, and the consequences they now faced. The letter began with a simple statement of facts. I knew about the adoption they had hidden, the trust they had plundered, their financial desperation, and their calculated decision to let me die for inheritance money. I included copies of key documents, the original trust documents, bank records showing their withdrawals, hospital records documenting their refusal to authorize treatment, and security footage timestamps showing them searching my apartment while I was comatose. I outlined the legal actions already in motion, the new will removing them as beneficiaries, the civil suit to recover misappropriated funds, and the evidence prepared for potential criminal charges. But I also included something they wouldn't expect: a conditional offer. If they signed legally binding confessions acknowledging their actions and agreeing to repay what they had stolen from the trust, with a reasonable payment plan based on their means, I would not pursue criminal charges. Why give them any option at all? Michael asked when I shared this part of the plan. Because this isn't about revenge, I replied. It's about justice, closure, and moving forward. I want them to acknowledge what they did, face appropriate consequences, and then I want to be done with them completely. With the letter complete, we moved to the final phase of the plan, setting the trap. Working with Dr. Martinez and the hospital administration, we arranged for controlled misinformation to be released. If my parents inquired about my condition, they would be told that my condition had deteriorated, that I was not expected to survive, but that immediate family should come to the hospital as soon as possible. They'll come running when they think there's money to claim, Michael predicted. I wasn't physically ready to face them yet, so we arranged for me to be moved from the hospital the day before they were likely to arrive. The room would be empty, except for the letter and legal documents waiting for them. Are you sure you don't want to see their faces when they realize you're alive and know everything? Amanda asked. I shook my head. I don't need to see their reaction to know I've reclaimed my power. The letter will say everything that needs to be said. We had security cameras in place to document their reactions. Not for my satisfaction, but as potential evidence. Hospital security and an off-duty police officer Michael knew would be nearby to ensure they didn't destroy the documents in a panic. As the plan came together, I focused on my physical recovery and emotional healing. I worked with a therapist specialized in family trauma, processing the complex grief of losing the family I thought I had and discovering the extent of their betrayal. The opposite of love isn't hate, my therapist told me. It's indifference. Your goal shouldn't be to stop hating them, but to reach a point where they simply don't matter to you anymore. The night before my parents were expected at the hospital, I finalized my letter with a paragraph I had carefully considered. For 34 years, I tried to earn your love, never understanding why it seemed impossible. Now I know it wasn't about me at all. You never saw me as your son, only as a source of income and later, a potential windfall. I deserved better parents, and you'll have to live with the knowledge that you failed at the most important job you ever had. I'm choosing now to free myself from the weight of your betrayal and build a life with people who value me for who I am, not what I'm worth. I signed it simply, Maximilian, the son you never deserved. With everything in place, I left the hospital quietly that evening, headed for Walter's guest house to begin my real recovery, not just of my body, but of my life and sense of self. Are you ready for tomorrow? Walter asked, as he helped me settle in. More than ready, I replied. For the first time, I feel like I'm taking control of my own story. The next morning, Michael called me from his surveillance position near the hospital. They're here. All three of them just pulled up in your father's car. I took a deep breath. Keep me updated. Through Michael's communications and the security cameras we had arranged to access, I watched the scene unfold from the safety of Walter's guest house. My parents entered the hospital looking appropriately somber, dressed in muted colors that suggested mourning without committing to it fully. Cassandra trailed behind them, her designer sunglasses perched on her head despite the cloudy day. They approached the information desk, and my father spoke with the practiced gravity of someone performing grief. We're here to see our son, Maximilian Hartwell. We received a call about his condition. The receptionist, who had been briefed on the situation, nodded sympathetically. Of course, Mr. Hartwell. Please have a seat, and I'll have Dr. Martinez come speak with you. They sat in the waiting area, and through the security feed, I could see them talking in low voices. My father checked his watch repeatedly. Cassandra scrolled through her phone, occasionally showing something to my mother. None of them displayed the anxiety or distress you'd expect from family rushing to a critically ill patient's bedside. After 15 minutes, Dr. Martinez approached them. She had agreed to participate in this plan out of her own sense of justice and to protect future patients from similar abandonment. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell? I'm Dr. Martinez, one of the physicians who's been treating your son. My father stood quickly, extending his hand. Yes, we came as soon as we could. How is he? Dr. Martinez's expression remained professionally neutral. If you'll follow me, we can speak privately about Maximilian's situation. She led them down the hallway toward my former room. As they walked, my mother spoke just loud enough for the corridor security camera to pick up. Has there been any brain activity? We want to be prepared for difficult decisions. We should discuss all of that in private. Dr. Martinez replied, her voice cool. My father cleared his throat. And his personal effects? We'll need to collect those as well. Of course, Dr. Martinez said. Everything is in his room. When they reached my room, Dr. Martinez paused at the door. I should prepare you. This might not be what you're expecting. She opened the door, revealing the empty bed with the envelope placed prominently on the pillow. The confusion on their faces was immediate. "Where is he?" my father demanded, looking around as if I might be hiding somewhere in the small room. "Maximilian was discharged yesterday," Dr. Martinez said calmly. "He's made a remarkable recovery." That's wonderful news," my mother stammered, her voice failing to convey any actual joy. "But why didn't anyone call us?" "As I understand it," Dr. Martinez replied, "Maximilian left specific instructions regarding his discharge and who should be notified. He did, however, leave that for you." She nodded toward the envelope. My father approached the bed cautiously, as if the envelope might bite. He picked it up, noting his and my mother's names, written on the front in my handwriting. "What is this?" Cassandra asked, peering over his shoulder. "Perhaps you should read it," Dr. Martinez suggested. "I'll give you some privacy." She left the room, closing the door behind her but remaining nearby as we had arranged. Through the hidden camera we had legally installed with hospital permission, I watched as my father opened the envelope and pulled out the thick stack of papers. His expression changed from confusion to shock as he began reading. "What does it say?" my mother pressed, moving closer. "He knows," my father said, his voice barely audible. "He knows everything." "Knows what?" Cassandra asked, grabbing for the letter. My father's hands began to shake as he continued reading. "The adoption. The trust fund. Everything." My mother snatched the papers from him, her eyes scanning rapidly. "This is impossible." He was unconscious. He couldn't have heard us. "Apparently he did," my father said, his face ashen. "They don't deserve to call themselves parents," Walter said firmly. "Family isn't just blood or legal documents. It's the people who stand by you, who value your life." "Keep reading," my father said grimly. When she reached the part about the new will and my removal of them as beneficiaries, she gasped. No, he can't do this to us. Not after everything we did for him." "Everything you did for him?" Cassandra grabbed the letter. "What did you do? What trust fund? What adoption? What is going on?" My parents exchanged a look of panic as their carefully maintained facade began crumbling before their daughter's eyes. "Your brother was adopted," my mother finally admitted. "We never told either of you. And there was money," my father added reluctantly. "A trust from his biological grandparents. Money that you took," Cassandra read from the letter, her eyes widening. "Money that was supposed to be his." She looked up at them in disbelief. "And you refused to pay for his medical treatment? You just left him here to die?" "It wasn't like that," my mother protested weakly. "We were in shock. We didn't think clearly. It says here you went to his apartment while he was in a coma looking for his will," Cassandra continued, her voice rising. "You were counting on him dying. You were going to take his money." My father reached for the letter. "Give me that. We need to destroy this before anyone else sees it." "It's too late," my mother said, pointing to the final page. "He's made copies. He's already filed legal paperwork. He has evidence of everything." Just then, there was a knock at the door, and it opened to reveal Amanda, my lawyer, accompanied by hospital security and the off-duty police officer Michael had arranged. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell?" Amanda said formally. "I'm Amanda Daniels, Maximilian's attorney. I see you've received his letter. I'm here to formally serve you with these." She held out another set of documents. "What are those?" my father asked, not moving to take them. "Legal papers regarding the civil suit for misappropriation of trust funds, as well as a restraining order preventing you from contacting Maximilian or accessing any of his properties or businesses." "This is ridiculous," my father blustered. "He can't prove any of this." "I assure you, he can," Amanda replied calmly. "We have extensive documentation, including records of the trust, bank transfers, and of course, hospital records of your abandonment of him in a life-threatening situation." My mother began to cry, not from remorse but from fear of consequences. "We're his parents. We raised him. He owes us." "I believe the letter explains his position on what he owes you," Amanda interrupted. "Now, Will you accept these documents? Or shall I have them delivered to your home with a process server? My father reluctantly took the papers, his hands still shaking. Oh, and one more thing, Amanda added. Maximilian wanted me to remind you that he's included an offer in his letter. I suggest you consider it carefully. It's more generous than you deserve. As Amanda left with security, my parents and sister remained in the empty room. The weight of their actions and the consequences finally sinking in. Their faces had gone white. Just as I had anticipated, their carefully constructed world of lies was collapsing, and for once, they were powerless to manipulate the situation. Mom, Dad, Cassandra said, her voice small and uncertain for the first time I could remember. What have you done? I closed the laptop, not needing to see more. The confrontation had played out exactly as planned. And now it was time to focus on my future. Not their past. The weeks following the hospital confrontation were focused on healing both physically and emotionally. Walter's guest house became my sanctuary, a place where I could rebuild my strength without the shadow of my parents' betrayal hanging over me. My physical recovery progressed steadily. The broken bones mended. The surgical scars faded. And, with Miguel's continued physical therapy sessions, I regained most of my former mobility. There would always be some limitations, a slight limp when tired, occasional pain during weather changes, but considering how close I'd come to death, these were minor concessions. You're doing remarkably well, Dr. Martinez said during a follow-up appointment, 6 weeks after the accident. Medically speaking, you're something of a miracle. I had excellent care, I replied, thinking of how she had fought for me when my own family wouldn't. The emotional healing was more complicated. Working with my therapist, I began unpacking a lifetime of subtle rejection and emotional neglect. Now understanding it through the lens of knowing I was adopted. It wasn't that there was something wrong with you, my therapist emphasized. The issue was always with them and their inability to truly bond with you. Through Amanda's legal connections, I was able to learn more about my biological family. My parents, James and Rebecca Thornton, had been graduate students at Boston University, he in computer science, she in bioinformatics. The parallels to my own interests were striking. They had died in a multi-car accident on the Massachusetts Turnpike when I was 6 months old, having no living siblings who could take me in. My biological grandparents had established the trust fund before their own deaths a few years later, hoping to provide for my future and education. They could never have imagined that the couple who adopted me would misuse those funds so egregiously. Most surprisingly, Amanda discovered I had distant biological relatives still living, a second cousin on my father's side who was a professor at UCLA, and a great aunt on my mother's side living in a retirement community in Florida. I reached out to them cautiously, not wanting to disrupt their lives but curious about these blood connections I never knew existed. Carol, my great aunt, responded with immediate warmth. I've wondered about you for years, she told me during our first phone call. Rebecca sent me pictures when you were born. You have her eyes. We arranged for her to visit once I was stronger, and meeting her was like finding a piece of myself I hadn't known was missing. She brought photo albums, stories, and a sense of connection to my biological parents that helped me understand where I came from. They would be so proud of what you've accomplished, she said, looking through news articles about my company. Using technology to help people, that's exactly what they were passionate about. As my support network expanded, my biological family was only part of the picture. Walter continued to be a daily presence, our relationship evolving into something that felt increasingly like father and son. Dr. Martinez and I developed a friendship beyond patient and physician, occasionally meeting for coffee to discuss advances in medical technology. Even Miguel, my physical therapist, and Lisa, the hospital social worker, became important parts of my chosen family. 3 months after the accident, I was strong enough to return to work part-time. My company had continued smoothly under my COO's leadership, but I was eager to get back to the innovations that had always driven me. My experience as a patient gave me new insights into how our software could better serve people in crisis. We need to make the patient experience more central to everything we do, I told my development team during my first meeting back. I've seen firsthand how technology can either support or hinder healing. This new direction energized the company, leading to a suite of patient-centered modules that would eventually become our most successful products. As for my parents and sister, they responded to my letter and legal actions in different ways. My father initially threatened countersuits and made blustering statements about ungrateful children, but faced with the overwhelming evidence Amanda had compiled, he eventually accepted the settlement offer. He and my mother signed the confessions, agreed to the repayment plan, and retreated into a much-reduced lifestyle as their financial house of cards collapsed. Cassandra surprised me by reaching out separately, requesting a meeting without our parents' knowledge. We met at a neutral location with Amanda present as a precaution. "I didn't know," she said immediately, her designer clothes and perfect makeup now seeming like armor rather than accessories. "About the adoption, the trust, any of it. I swear I didn't know they left you at the hospital." I studied her face, looking for the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to seeing. Instead, I saw genuine distress. "I believe you didn't know everything," I replied carefully. "But you must have sensed something wasn't right about how they treated me." She looked down. "I did, but it was easier to go along with it, to enjoy being the favorite." She met my eyes again. "That was wrong of me. I'm sorry." We didn't become close overnight, but that meeting opened the door to a more honest relationship. Cassandra had to build her own life without our parents' financial support for the first time, taking an entry-level job and moving to a modest apartment. The adjustment was difficult for her, but I saw glimpses of a stronger, more authentic person emerging from the entitled girl she had been. 6 months after the accident, I established the Thornton Foundation, named for my biological parents. Its mission was twofold: to provide medical support for patients without family advocates, and to fund research into the psychological impacts of adoption on families. The foundation became my way of transforming trauma into purpose, creating meaning from the pain I had experienced. The most profound healing came not from the professional success or even the justice served, but from the relationships I built with people who chose to value me. Walter, who had championed me from our first meeting at MIT, Dr. Martinez, who refused to let hospital bureaucracy determine my fate, Amanda, who fought for my legal rights with unwavering determination, Carol, who connected me to my biological roots with joy rather than obligation, even Cassandra, who was slowly finding her own path toward authenticity and responsibility. 1 year after the accident, I held a small gathering at my new home, a comfortable house overlooking the Charles River. The people who had become my true family were all there, celebrating not just my recovery but the new life I had built. "I'd like to make a toast," Walter said, raising his glass, "to Maximilian, who faced unimaginable betrayal and emerged not bitter, but better, who taught us all that family is defined by love and loyalty, not blood or legal documents." As we clinked glasses, I felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. The parents who had raised me had seen me only as a financial resource, first to exploit and then to inherit from. But their failure had ultimately freed me to discover my true worth and to build connections based on genuine care rather than obligation. The letter I left them had closed one chapter of my life, but it had opened so many more. In losing the family I thought I had, I found the family I truly deserved. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, know that healing is possible. The road isn't easy, but surrounding yourself with people who value you for who you are, not what you can give them, makes all the difference. Has someone in your life ever shown their true colors when you needed them most? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too can rise above betrayal and build a life filled with authentic connections. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is far more precious than the one we're born or adopted into.